Gibraltar, a British overseas territory occupying a narrow peninsula of Spain's southern Mediterranean coast and connected only by a low sandy isthmus. It is a monumental pillar dividing Spain and Morocco. Since the 18th century, Gibraltar has been a symbol of British naval strength. Once a heavily fortified British air and naval base that guards the Strait of Gibraltar, the only entrance to the Mediterranean Sea from the Atlantic Ocean. It is now a prominent finance centre and a popular tourist destination thanks to its immense history, culture and warm climate. Gibraltar was captured from Spain in 1704 during the War of Spanish Succession by an Anglo-Dutch fleet. British sovereignty was then formalised in 1713 by the Treaty of Utrecht, and Gibraltar became a British colony in 1830. Gibraltar has been proudly British for 300 years, despite intimidation over the years. The border between Spain and Gibraltar was closed by General Franco in 1969 during his siege of the British colony. Gibraltar was cut off from all communication via Spain to the outside world. The border gates remained firmly locked even after the general's death in 1975. They were only opened for the first time in 13 years, shortly after midnight on 15th December 1982.
Life was very, at the beginning, very miserable because obviously all the communications were cut off, telephone lines, a lot of workforce removed, and there was a lot of chaos. But after that, we coped. And there was a lot, myself, I used to play in a band, and we used to play every Friday and Saturday because the people didn't go to Spain or anywhere, they stayed in the Rock. Everybody used to work very hard, used to have 2, 3, 4, 5 jobs, and they used to save money to go either around to Tangiers into Spain on holiday or go directly into the UK. So that was the only things at the time.
Going back to the communication between Gibraltar and Spain, where we didn't have phones, I had a particular instance where my husband had to go to Morocco to make a telephone call because we'd been allocated a government house on the housing list, but my father was in Spain at the time and he had to be back within 3 days to go and view the house and sign for it. And the only way we could communicate with him was going to Morocco and making a telephone call. So that's what we did. We bought a ticket for the ferry, went to Morocco to make that phone call and bring him back to Gibraltar in time. My views on Brexit, I suppose, the same as everybody else. We're a bit fed up with it, really. If we had Brexit voted in that referendum, it should have happened by now. For Gibraltar, it would be catastrophic. It's the worst scenario because we've got an aggressive neighbour which harass us at any instance or an opportunity that they can. So we think that probably Brexit would just make the situation worse at our frontier.
Clearly remember is weekends in particular, as the frontier was closed. There was interesting anecdote is that at the gates of the frontier there's 2 sets of gates, the Spanish gates and the Gibraltar gates. The Spanish gates were closed, the Gibraltar gates remained open throughout the period of the closed frontier, symbolically signifying that Gibraltar had not closed the gates, Gibraltar was still open. But at weekends in particular, people would go down and shout to their relatives across in Spain, separated by a distance of maybe 50 to 100 yards, shouting across messages, asking how relatives were, showing newborn babies and the like, and that is something that is still very much in my mind. Brexit has been a complete disaster. It was the wrong decision, in my view, for the UK to vote to leave the EU. The UK has always been very insular, going back many years. The UK government should have resisted the calls for a referendum. But Britain has never really been a supporter of Europe. It has always maligned the EU and found, and it certainly happened in the UK press as well. It's always pick up negative stories.
It could have been avoided, actually. It's like a marriage. When you have a problem, you don't just run away. You sort of try and work things out before jumping ship. You know, they could have come to some agreement, maybe. I think it would be quite drastic. Supplies coming into Gibraltar would be affected, medical supplies, foodstuffs, workers that come into Gibraltar, vehicular traffic. The border is a lifeline. That would be a problem.
There is no benefits. The only benefits is that people are like...
Yeah, people in England are proud
Yeah,
of leaving the EU.
exactly.
even
They're
though
like, oh yeah, we're
fuck you up.
British. We don't need the EU. But there really, to be honest, there's no benefits because we get a lot of our things from the EU. Loads of shops are going to have to close down, maybe even or get different suppliers from different countries. Because now from Europe, like especially in Gib, that we get all of our supplies, a lot of our supplies from Spain
or France.
To be honest, I don't really understand why Brexit is happening, just because of that. Because if there is no benefits to it, why is it even happening?
It's not it's happening because the politicians are very selfish and they want things that are not going to happen. Like the majority of Gibraltar voted against Brexit because the people in England and British people don't really know how it's going to affect them, let alone us who were like, you've got a tug of war and we're literally the rope.
Especially to us, like in England, there is going to be a lot of problems, but here especially, because we have the border and we always cross to Spain.
I don't think of myself as totally, it's like a sort of nationalistic thing, to be honest. But I don't think we want to be anything else but British, if you know what I mean.
First and foremost, I consider myself Gibraltarian, and then I consider myself British after that, and I think that's nobody wants to be something they're not born into. Everybody wants to be what they are, and we in Gibraltar are Gibraltarians, and we consider ourselves British Gibraltarians. That's it. We don't want to be anything else.
That's a really hard
I
question
am
to answer.
Gibraltarian, therefore I am British.
What does it mean to be British?
God bless the Queen.
It's really what we are. It's very difficult to explain. It is our nationality, as I think I mentioned earlier on. The Britishness of Gibraltar grew after the Second World War.
And especially my late mother used to have the picture of the Queen in her kitchen, and we are very pro-British. Being British is what we was born and taught, and that's what we want to be. British we are, British we stay.